Well, this is Jeff Sloan. Welcome. It's a pleasure to be part of this program. We've got a great session ahead. We have Guy Gordon with us. Most of us in the community know Guy, certainly know Guy well, and are very familiar with him. We're thrilled to have him be part of the program this morning. And we also have Burt Powers. He's been with Dell for 18 years, graduated Texas A&M University, joined Dell as an inside sales consumer advisor in 2002, and during his illustrious career at Dell, Burt has held various sales and leadership roles across consumer, member purchase program, and small business divisions. And today, Burt is the Senior Director for North America Small Business Sales with a team of over 550 people focused on startups and small business. They've done an amazing job at Dell. I mentioned Guy, you and I talked yesterday. What an incredible thing for a big company like Dell to be able to operate so nimbly and operate like a small company and serve the needs of the startups out there that need the services they provide. Incredible.
No question. I think that there is a real desire. I mean, you saw the headlines this morning on all the morning news programs. A new one-day record for the United States, 45,000 new cases of COVID. Whatever we thought was a new normal, apparently it's like the old Who song, meet the new normal, same as the old normal.
Yes,
Okay. And
indeed.
so we're going to be navigating these waters, and they're going to be troubled waters going on well past August. And a lot of states that hadn't experienced this now are in a different learning curve. So the experiences that Dell has had, that Burt has had, that you and I have had here in the state of Michigan become pretty useful for a lot of people that are now entering some new territory.
Well, it's good to be with you, Guy, and we have, as I said, a great session ahead. Let's get Burt on the show with us as well. Let's get some expertise on this program. Burt, welcome.
Good morning. Thanks
Hey,
for
it's
having me.
good to have you. Tell us a little bit about your division and what you do at Dell and how you're serving small business today. Just kind of set us up for the session.
Sure. So, small business is an organization that's been around as long as Dell has, and I've been with the organization in this role a little over 5 years. And during that time, we've been evolving our own practices in serving the small business community because of how critical and important it is for the growth of our general economy and then our company itself. And so the way my business is set up is we have a couple parts. We have what most people probably know as our traditional inbound model. So everyone is an inside sales agent, an advisor that it supports all customers on any way that you interact with us. The traditional way is you can call us directly. You can go to our website and then you could chat with someone if you need advice or counsel or support. And then we have a follow up program in our outbounding organization where we stay connected and reconnect with customers throughout different phases of their growth and technology needs. So we really have a full circle way to interact and help customers with all phases of their growth and technology needs.
And Bert, these are changing times. I mean, the guy just set it up by saying, this crisis is going to be around for a while. I think we're seeing that. We were all hoping, with the summer euphoria coming on and everything else, that maybe it was going to go away,
Right,
but it's not going to. And so
right.
it's impacting not only our daily lives, but certainly, as we know, business as well in so many ways. And I think work from home, remote workforce is something that's going to be a reality that businesses are going to have to face in the future. They're going to have to manage it and execute productively and efficiently
Mhm.
in this new normal. What are some of the things and the programs that Dell offers to address those changing needs, those now critical needs, as we go forward for our small businesses to be able to operate?
Yeah, I think I answer it kind of two ways. When I look at experiencing this on the inside and then talking with customers throughout the way. When this first happened, I think there was this almost kind of panic scenario of what do we do? And I take a step back and I think about my own organization. We have largely enabled and empowered, from either disaster recovery or various reasons, the ability to work from home and be nimble to continue to serve our customers. So we were largely prepared in that regard, but it wasn't in practice. And in my 18 years, we didn't have design training and development for a pandemic response type setup. So we were having to learn and evolve pretty quickly ourselves. In the meantime, being 100% available to our customers as they were going through this transition. And so what we found very early on was a lot of small businesses traditionally invested in technology that was not nimble, be it desktops or something set up in an office environment or a retail location or where they operate. And so they were really trying and needing that advice and counsel on, okay, how do I take that to, a home office, a remote space, and so forth. And so, fortunately for us, since our advisors kind of work across all that technology, and we have so many resources dedicated to specialization, we're able to guide them through that conversation. And what we found were the small businesses really focused on how do I maintain being open and operating
Right.
in this environment?
How do I
And then if
survive?
I am right, how do I survive? That's exactly right. Like, how do I survive? How do I move forward? And so their attention is really in a lot of places. Because if you think, a month prior, all of our dialogue was around investing, growing, and expanding, and
Growth,
people
absolutely.
adding technology and growing install base, et cetera. And so it was might change for them. So our advisors also provided a lot of that counsel of, okay, here's how we can shift and here's how we can operate. So you saw a mass adoption of laptops, saw a mass adoption of kind of a work from home setup, your docs, your cams, et cetera. And along the way, we're trying to make sure that we're incorporating a reminder of we also need to think about how to be secure, how to be efficient,
For
how to
sure.
back up your data, and then how do you transact if in a remote environment versus when you're traditionally in a storefront. So quite honestly, it was a lot of customer education around what is the new normal. Now we're transitioning into a phase more of customers that have gone through the survival phase and now they're finding ways to be successful, understanding and reinvesting and expanding that technology that can help them grow in what even customers have adopted to be the new normal as well.
Guy, you've been broadcasting from home, working from home the last couple of
Yeah.
months. Certainly I'm an entrepreneur with all the activities that I do. You are too, and you're dealing with the same kinds of issues, as you grow your career and your empire, the Guy Gordon empire, and working from home and dealing with the issues. How's it been working from home, and what are some of the
Wait,
challenges you faced?
let
I'll
me
share
get
some of
my
ours,
crown
but yeah,
because I
yeah.
didn't know I had an empire.
Yo, come
I,
on, of course you do. Your
I think what
empire,
Burt said is so important, and it is we were so obsessed at the outset with the hardware and with the hard skill part of this that now it's really about sustainability and maximizing the soft skills that we need going forward. So, Burt, I think and I've detected this with my team. You've worked in a team environment for probably most of your career. I did in newsrooms.
Right.
It all started with the morning meeting where everybody's having a skull session, everybody's banging ideas off of each other. There's a lot of good exchanges and synergies. How do you sustain that in a remote environment from a soft skills standpoint, similar to what you have done, and not lose that edge and that spark that comes with that first get together in the morning where
Right.
great ideas are hatched?
Right. Yeah, it's funny. We survey and we constantly hear from our employees and annual feedback, local feedback, and so forth. And for the longest time, we've always had this. We want more and more work from home for a variety of reasons. And we've been trying to figure out, well, how do we incorporate it? Because in our environment, it's very fast paced. It's a team based environment. There's a lot of learning and training and coaching, recognition and rewards that we had set up for an in office scenario and the support systems that go along with that. And so, overnight, everyone transitions remote because we had the technology to do it. And the employees were really excited about, okay, now I can, wear shorts to and a t-shirt and I'm not interacting with teammates. I don't have to have a commute, sit in traffic. I can eat out of my own fridge. And so there was, okay, I'm pretty excited about this. That started to wear off pretty quickly. And so we were looking for, okay, how do we keep that motivation, inspiration? So to your point, we implemented a lot of best practice sharing, morning coffee sessions remote. Zoom is one of our most used tools and one of our best friends. We started having remote happy hours, team dinners. People would take lunch breaks together in a virtual environment. And but then I got to admit that started to wear out its enthusiasm as well. And you can see people start having a static image instead of video more often, so they're not as engaged. The other thing that stood out is we were probably overusing it and doing too many meetings and syncs, and it was taking away from their ability to be as productive or as efficient as they were hoping for. So we do a lot of listening, a lot of feedback, and a lot of best practice sharing to try to continue to evolve. And so we see a lot of creativity where teams do fun, kind of music videos, kind of in a TikTok type environment, or they'll host home tour sessions, or they'll host recipe sharing where they can interact. So we're just constantly fostering and requesting that kind of creativity, and then we share it broadly so that people can feel like they stay engaged. The other thing that we do is we use the technology from the manager to the employee to kind of replace that face-to-face interaction. So that way, we don't lose the ability to, observe what you're doing on your desktop so I can show you how to be more efficient versus you just having to explain it. So in some cases, it's helped. And then for me specifically, I work between Nashville and Austin, and my face-to-face interaction was really dependent on where I was there. I've really enjoyed being so much more accessible and personable with my entire organization because we can be face-to-face when normally it would be limited to those travel situations.
Right.
And so that's been a big benefit for me. Uh, and I think the last thing I'd share on that is really encouraging small business owners and leadership to balance the conversation and recognize that employees are now in a setting that is can be filled with challenges of their own. Do they have a quiet workspace? Do they have an uninterrupted environment? We have to be very comfortable and very flexible with I have two small children, I have a
Yeah.
dog. And our organization and company as a whole is gotten really great at saying, "Hey, we get it. Things are going to happen. We just go with it, and our customers are comfortable with it." If y'all saw the the Dell advertisement that was the commercial one for all, you saw some of those were my employees and sales reps, and they have holding a dog or a kid, and it's just that's life right now, and we've adjusted to that, and I think it's worked well and received well. But we need good feedback. We really encourage, let us know where we're doing it too often, too much, what we need to do less of, because we have to maintain, to your point, a very inspired or motivated workforce, or none of this is going to work.
Right.
For me, running a portfolio of ventures here at Startup Nation, some of the challenges for me has been um, really in the way of keeping company culture going. Now, you mentioned, Zoom meetings, and I think there was some novelty to some of the things we were doing early on. You mentioned, Bert, that it tends to wear off a little bit. And I think that's really true. When you're not in the same room together, it's amazing how what we took for granted before, just an interpersonal interaction, face to face, physically in the same space, reading body language and all the other things that go into modern communication that we've now lost, and having to depend on the technology to make that happen. So I think for me, keeping culture, keeping a sense of camaraderie and teamwork, and beyond that, even for efficiency and productivity, knowing where, the whole team knowing where we are in terms of our goals and our tracking against what we're trying to achieve, that's really tough to do over technology. And so I think that the more technology that comes our way, both hardware and software, to facilitate those connections. And I think, frankly, too, there's another aspect of it, and that is us getting used to that being the new normal and finding our comfort level, finding best practices, and all that goes with utilizing the things you're providing for us to be able to optimize and maintain a good sense of workflow and productivity and efficiency and connection and company culture and all the rest. Um, it's been challenging for me. Admittedly, I have felt a little lost myself as a leader. That's never good, of course. And wondering what my team might be doing at any given moment. These are challenging times, new things to learn and embrace, and I guess new opportunities too that come from all this.
Yeah, I agree. I really challenge my team to think about the behaviors as leaders specifically we're demonstrating that builds that trust with our employees,
Trust is
because you,
critical.
you, you have to have a great deal of it to the fact that I'm trusting that you're as productive or efficient and dedicated and working just as hard in a remote environment where we don't have that, to your point, body language and observation. And so we just really index to that balance of personal and professional development, good frequent check-ins. But on the trust and behaviors, I really challenge leaders that we have to demonstrate exceptional leadership. For example, when you have scheduled meetings, show up
Mm-hmm.
on time and show up prepared.
Mm-hmm.
When you have scheduled one-on-ones, you have to keep them. There's so much being thrown at us. It's very easy to, okay, I got to move this meeting or this meeting. And the employees, they value that interaction even more than in the office. And the behaviors we're demonstrating, either builds or erodes that trust. So I just ask people to be really sensitive to that. I think the other is back to that technology balance. So if we do have a lot of Zoom meetings, it's okay if we're going to have a one-on-one while we're both collectively, just on our phone, taking a walk outside,
Hmm.
getting some fresh air, stretching our legs. Um, I'm asking for people to be much more comfortable with schedules being kind of out of the normal. So maybe if you're doing homeschool or you have to balance with your spouse and children, and you need blocks of time to be able to do that, that's okay. Just make sure your customers know, your teammates and your manager know, and good communication, and we support that. So that's where I think a lot of that communication in combination with the technology to where you can stay connected, help people feel connected and motivated and supported uh,
Yeah.
effectively right now.
Can I ask a follow up to that? Because I think that's a really good, you talked about balance and flexibility.
Mhm.
But in terms of time on task assignments and assessing
Yes.
productivity, understanding that flexibility needs to be built in, but you also have target dates and deadlines.
Yes.
How do you monitor that without appearing inflexible and allowing for the disruptions that the home office environment can create?
Right. Yeah, I think it starts with when I look at, anything that's a project or a task, the first is there a hard deadline that must be achieved? Is there a business critical reason for customer segment company that we have to achieve it by that deadline? And then we kind of walk it back. And then so if someone is tasked with that very early on, we kind of identify, is that achievable? And if it is, great. And then we'll have a series of check ins to see if we're on task and you're prepared for that versus a random check in that you're not expecting, and you catch them off guard and then you penalize them for whatever the status may be. So I think it comes up with a really good set of structures uh, and then good expectation in the beginning. And then also, depending on the complexity, hey, oh, I'm encouraged if you need help, right? Ask for the additional resources, direction, etc., so that you can exceed the expectation. But I really think it comes to a great, what I call a management system, where there's it's very organized. You're both aligned to either the ends or the expectations and the timeline, so that way the employee is very clear. And if any point they're going to miss or they need additional help, there's a level of comfort and trust. You raise your hand
Hmm.
and say, I need a little bit of help. And then you support and you continue that way. I think the hardest is if you create an environment to where you over index on a very extreme stretch or expectation that may be a little bit unrealistic. So getting close would actually be success, and the employee feeling incredibly stressed. And you do these kind of swoop in checks unannounced, and disruptive and you know unorganized in a way that the employee feels like, oh my gosh, I'm constantly under duress, and no one succeeds in that environment.
Yeah. Bert, if I'm a startup today, I mean, as we know, this crisis. One of the things that is happening is that it's creating a lot of opportunity. Let's say I want to seize on that opportunity and create a new startup today,
Sure.
or let's say even if I'm not creating a new startup, I'm currently at a startup and I want to set up my home office. What are some of the things
Mhm.
that you recommend as the blocking and tackling fundamentals to setting myself up properly to make sure I can communicate effectively, operate, and be productive effectively? What do I need in that office from your perspective? Please share with us both hardware and software to get
Yeah,
set up right.
I think kind of a two-part there. The first was, if you have an idea, we're working really closely with kind of third-party organizations to give us market insights and trends kind of by region. So if you have an idea, I think it starts with validating there's a good market opportunity there that you can capitalize on, and understanding your competition. What are they providing and how are you going to be different? And I think about some of these sub industries that are accelerating. right now where there's a ton of opportunity for people that have that specialization, that service, or that idea that they could take advantage of. And so then it's, okay, what is my competition doing? How am I going to differentiate? And then I go through my strategy, and I got to outline my business plan on how I'm going to be successful.
Sure.
So in my opinion, it starts with, okay, how much do I have to invest, and how am I going to maximize the use of those dollars? Technology, I think, is a fundamental part of that consideration. And then how are you going to acquire customers, your marketing plan or your customer
Sure.
acquisition plan? Um, and so I think personally, it starts with a very thorough outline so that you're on task, you stay on budget, and you give yourself deliverables to accomplish those almost sequentially so you can be successful when you
Hmm.
go. On the technology side, that's where I see a lot of customers probably try to underinvest because they want to buy the bare minimum in terms of saving the capital or money for other areas. But what happens in that scenario is, if you go too entry level that doesn't scale, you end up replacing and then losing that investment on that initial piece of technology. So, for an example, if you're going to buy um, a system, you want to buy a computer, just its most basic form, and you say, okay, a desktop is less expensive than a laptop, right? Just kind of spec for spec. Okay, that makes sense. But if you have a model that's going to require customer facing interaction, well, you probably need to go ahead and assess buying a laptop touchscreen customer facing
Hmm.
that you're going to be able to take with you so you can actually do your work where you are versus trying to do things on notepads, bring it back, and it's less efficient. And so I know that's a very elementary example, but I think that's kind of a start. The second part to that is what we said earlier, is don't cut yourself short when it comes to protecting your customers' data and storing and back up your information, because you can start off with some early success and you have a security breach, you're almost done,
And
right?
that's a huge
Most
issue
customers
today.
don't recover from
Right.
that. Right.
Cybersecurity at home. We've got all this diverse workforce now. They don't
Yeah,
have the VPN, and all the other
that's
things
right.
protecting them.
Doing home
They're
network basic
exposed. Home
things, and
network.
they're very
Yeah.
susceptible to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's a critical issue, and I was hoping that you went there when I asked the question. I think it's really important for startups to be aware. So, what do you recommend? How do I protect myself at home?
Yeah, I think my first recommendation is take advantage of the resources. Feel very free to and comfortable to call my Dell Small Business Advisors, and so we have, they're free. They're free consultants available to all customers, and you can call in, and or we can get connected to you if you go to Dell.com/StartupNation, and then we get interacted into our motion, and someone can talk through your very specific environment. You can talk through your very specific applications that you're running or plan on running, the technology and where you operate, and they can design a unique and specific system for you. A
Hmm.
lot of the elements are very consistent, but there'll be some kind of a la carte type scenarios to make sure it's exactly perfect for your application. And you think about the traditional technology, the connectivity, a secure. You mentioned VPN, firewall, uh, cybersecurity software, and then the other one that's really important to that is how you're backing up data. So, for example, if you're storing 100% of your information on a system that has a spinning hard drive, if you drop it or something spills on it, you potentially lose that, and
Right.
that's a tough scenario.
So,
So
backing up.
you got to hit all
Hmm.
those parts. Yeah.
Critical. Go ahead, Guy.
In terms,
Yeah.
yeah, Bert, in terms of, there's different levels of supervision. Some people need more, some people need less. And I don't want to go full Big Brother on anybody, but I'm going to play the Orwellian villain here because it happens on two levels. Some people need more supervision. And also, with this distance, we're also missing out on those spontaneous learning moments when you're mentoring or grooming a new employee or a younger employee or a new member to the team. How do you do that without appearing like your big brother?
Yeah,
Hmm.
that's a one. So I'll start with, we don't do anything like for us. I'm not going to do anything where you don't know I'm engaged with you. I'm never going to be in the background without your knowledge or okay of monitoring your system et cetera. So we avoid that because we don't want to erode that trust and buy-in with our employees.
Well, let me ask really quickly, is there
Yeah.
some way that you can use, whether it's Google Docs or some other software, so that you can see them updating the work product and
Mhm.
Oh yeah.
experience that as well?
Yes, we use SharePoints a lot, and so when it comes to communicating between resource groups where they're interacting with one another or they're engaging with one customer, but transitioning from one specialist to next, that would be a universal communication. And so we'll use SharePoint. We also use Salesforce.com to where we are centrally keeping the notes and activity on the same customer or same opportunities or hey next steps, etc. And so everyone that's involved with the project can see that at one time. We have transitioned also to Microsoft Teams, and that's
Hmm.
been a great way for us to where we have groups. Anybody that uses that technology, you can, if I'm working with my software and peripherals team, I can work exclusively with them without the rest of the organization have to filter through it, as an example.
Hmm.
And so we can share documents back and forth and update through there. So that's been a big help as well.
Guys, this crisis has been a major crisis in so many ways, culturally, in society, and in our lifestyles, and in business as well. And no one would want to pay this price for the benefit that I'm about to mention. But I think, in times of crisis, we mentioned there's always opportunities being born, new businesses being born. I know one day we'll look back and read about some of the great companies born out of this out of this era. And so we know that's happening. I think another thing that is a positive, and you guys feel free to jump in and comment on this, you know, a lot of the changes that we're seeing, whether it's work from home, whether it's, not flying to Los Angeles to take a 1 hour meeting when you're forced to do that because that's the way you do business, these kind of legacy things that we were dealing with in business before. A lot of these things are being shaken down and shaken out of business today. And I think, that's some of the benefit. I think there needed to be some of this, and it was a hard thing to disrupt, some of the ways we were doing business before. It takes a crisis like this, some kind of event like this, to really dramatically create the kind of sweeping change we're seeing today. And there are some positives, as I mentioned. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but Guy, as you've gotten used to being at home and doing what you do from home, and me getting used to operating the way I am, there's certainly some positives in this, aren't there?
I got to tell you, I hope my boss isn't listening, because I'll tell you how much I enjoy this, that I don't really want
Right.
to come back.
Well, well,
Yeah,
well, I mean,
and being totally frank, here's the interesting thing though, and I don't know if you guys have experienced this, especially if you have sometimes a contentious relationship with a coworker.
Mm.
This has led to me to be having a much healthier relationship with some of the teammates that I work with. Absence does make the heart grow fonder.
really, how does that play out? I mean, give us without being specific, but I mean, in general, as an
Well,
example.
we're going to debate day in and day out about what segment should be going into the show. What topics do we want to put in, and it's an ongoing and evolving discussion. And what I've noticed is, because we're at a distance, the reflexive, I'm digging in my heels and I'm not listening to you, doesn't happen as much anymore.
Interesting.
And
Huh.
I don't know why the change in communication does that, but it has. And so you've dealt with Laura, my producer. She's got a hard head, and I love that about her. But the headbutting that
I've
used to
only
go on
got
between
I've only
she and
got
I,
positive things to say about Laura.
yeah,
So,
yeah, oh no, she's terrific. But we are both highly opinionated type A
Mhm,
people.
right.
And I think in terms of the oil and water that sometimes that happens with us, we're much better in our own environments. And actually, we've had a lot more fun and enjoyed our relationship
Yeah.
than we have in the past 2 years.
Yeah, I think it's also opened up conversations around personal connections that you may not had before. And just because you're having that video experience of someone in their home setting where there's a different level of comfort, maybe you feel like less barriers of what you can and can't talk about in your personal lives in effort to increase and strengthen those relationships. And I feel so much more connected to a lot of the workforce that just through my own living in one city and having employees in another, to where we it does feel more personal than before. We spend a lot of time talking about kids and family and our environment or what's going on in our household and our local community. And from time, the kids that come in and my my manager and my peers, it all happens. They'll jump on and say hi from time to time, and so it's just it's such a positive support of beyond just the work to where we have a personal connection that I think has really helped accelerate
Yeah.
this too. And same thing with my employee base. And so, something I got to keep in mind, especially early on, and we were just talking about the record cases and cases increasing. And when this first happened and you had the big shutdown, we had to really adjust and appreciate that I've got a very young professional workforce. And so they work incredibly hard. They're very dedicated to their customers and the company, but they also like to have fun, right? They like to go out and enjoy themselves and do meetups and happy hours and so forth. And when they lost that, it took a toll, right?
Mm,
You kind of,
for
it
sure.
was a challenge to that balance of my personal life and professional life. And so it's been a little bit refreshing for them as things have started to reopen to where they still have that same level of enthusiasm for work, but they're better able to balance it by being able to go out in the community again safely and in the right setting. And so I think, in a lot of ways, that new normal is we've got to have just incorporate, even if went back 100%, if everything went completely back, I'd love to maintain that level of engagement, personal beyond the office environment that we've adopted. And I really enjoy it.
Mm,
We've got a comment from one of our listeners and one of our participants here, and I think it's a good one. And Dennis, thank you for making it. And he says he sees an overarching theme here: that good leadership will still flourish in a remote environment, and that in an extended environment, that poor leadership may be magnified and
yeah, that's a
exacerbated. Do
great
you
point.
agree with that? And I guess for those that maybe feel that their leadership skills are not up to snuff, how do you evolve? How do you reach higher and take advantage of what we're going through to maybe fill the gaps that you have?
Yeah, so I agree 100% with that statement. And I use the example in my Dell career. I've had great leaders that I've aspired to be like and implement their behaviors and practices, and then I've had some really poor leaders that I made a commitment that I would never demonstrate those behaviors. And I think we continue to experience that as people evolve. And what comes to mind is we also recognize, I'm not being naive or misrepresenting, that our business has been challenged, right? Even internally and across the company, to where, as we adjust and our customer base adjusts, um, working and dedicating the same level of effort may not produce the same result as it did before. And so, what could happen is leaders that over index to high expectation, this is your goal, and my check-in is focused more on what you're doing wrong and what you need to do better. It just wears people out. And I've kind of made the joke that it's kind of like that. Anybody that lives near the coast know what seagulls do, where they swoop in and they drop a bad present on you and they swoop right out. You kind of have a little bit of that leadership style, and that just doesn't work. So my role as a senior leader in my team is to also have that observation of leaders, just like leaders do for the frontline employees. We have to observe and provide feedback for them because this is new for them also, on
Hmm.
how they can ensure they're aware of potential blind spots, the tone and the approach that they're taking to situations, just so they can get constructive encouragement and help to enhance and better develop and be a better support mechanism for their people. So I have to do that, just like our managers do for the direct reports and the frontline sales makers. We do the same for all levels. So we kind of have that motion as it continues up the chain.
I think Dennis's comment is absolutely right on as well. I agree. For me, just using myself as an example again as a manager, uh, it's one thing to be managing the team, making sure they're productive, but admittedly, one of my challenges has been keeping up my own productivity because you're spending so much time either on the phone or using technology to communicate with the teams and making sure they're on track, serving their needs if they have them, et cetera, making sure they're as productive as they can be and feeling as comfortable as they can be in order to be as productive as they can be. But for me, taking all the time to do that part of being a manager has, to a degree, uh, decayed my ability to get my own work done, my part of the job done outside of the management. And I think that's been, getting used to being on phone calls, the new protocol, the new way of communicating effectively and efficiently. You can't do all the small talk or the quick little thing or the wave hello that you do in the office when you're, in personal. You have to get on the phone and talk, and that takes time. And so I think that's been a challenge for me, just to, kind of self-analyzing, to Dennis's point about being a good manager. That's been a challenge for me.
Yeah, and I
So,
think it's important that you have some truth tellers, if it's in your household or in your peer group, to where they recognize, hey, your stress levels are apparent, and that can erode all the good work you've done up to that point. So, I've made it as a personal practice to where I've got to build in unique break periods that I don't normally have in my
it's true.
schedule. Because when I'm in the office and I'm in between a conference call, I can walk around and talk with hundreds of employees and
That's
just
right.
have those, those conversations, and it's very refreshing for me. I'm getting feedback, and I love, fostering those relationships. I don't have that right now.
Right.
Everything is so structured and scheduled,
Right.
uh, that I've got to be aware of that, both for the health of my household too,
Sure.
right? I still have a role as a husband, and and other things we do in the community. So it's I think you had to have some really trusted people to also give you feedback, beyond your capabilities at work, but how things are going on. Just if you're demonstrating something that's a little bit different than how they normally see you interact with others. And so I encourage people to have that mechanism too.
I want to ask you guys a question, and I guess it kind of gets to what may be. I don't know what phase we're in right now. I think we're still in phase two, maybe. But when we get to that point, either when there's a vaccine or when the second wave has done its thing and we have some degree of herd immunity, if what are you going to do with your workforces, and what kind of metrics are you going to use to determine who does come back? Do you phase it in? Who do you choose first to come back? That maybe needs a little bit more supervision, and how do you avoid sending that message? What kind of, and maybe that's a premature question at this point, but I'm curious as to that. And also a second question. I'm going to be greedy because that's what media people do.
Okay.
Is that right now in the state of Michigan, we just got word for most school districts, they're going to have some kind of a hybrid.
Hmm.
Right.
The state is offering a $500 stipend to teachers to try to mitigate the cost of expanding their home office or expanding their capability to do this, because a lot of these districts just don't have the resources to do that. So my question for you, Burt or Jeff, is what kind of technology should I be looking at as an individual? And this is kind of self-serving on my part because I'd like to pass it along to my listeners. And then secondly, how are you going to do that re-engagement, and how do you determine who comes back, or even if you have as large a footprint going
Right.
forward?
Yeah, I'll start with the Dell plan, and my first response is it's fluid, and so at a global scale, it varies by country. And what we're working through right now is, I love that Dell, in a lot of ways, is going to operate even a little bit independent of, local and government direction, because we over-index, rightfully so, to employee safety, and we look at our specific environment and office settings, and with our own health team to evaluate what is the best for the safety of the employees, in the experience, for the company. And so what we're outlining under that direction of, dedicated people, is just what you said, a phased plan. So once there's a decision to say, okay, we're ready to start a phase back and approach, uh, they're going to have it incredibly structured and organized. And so if normal capacity is 100%, we're going to be far lower that as a percentage, and then it will be, strategically, outlined where the individuals would operate from within the office, and then safety protocols that everyone would adhere to while they're in the office. And what I'll do as a leader is, if I have these guidelines, I'm going to think about rotational patterns based on the needs of my employees. For example, my newest individuals, my new hires, probably need the most in the office time than, say, a very tenured person who could use once a week or every other week, as an example. But a new hire could use 2, 3, 4 days to get an in-office training type environment. So we'll look at it in a fluid way, kind of putting people in priorities and then sub priorities. and then we'll focus on probably a rotational system so that we meet and exceed the needs of all the employees with what balance they are looking for an in the office versus out of the office experience.
All right, and we also want to invite questions from our listeners and our participants. If you want to reach out via Zoom, Sean gave you the instructions at the outset. We'd love to hear more of your questions. And yeah, Bert, but in terms of getting back to the other part of my very greedy question,
Yeah.
is in terms of technology investment
Yep.
for the employee, where do you get the biggest bang for your buck? If you were advising, for instance, a school district,
Mhm.
where should they put that $500 stipend, or if they're going to, also kick some dollars in, where would a teacher, an educator, an assistant, a paraprofessional get the biggest bang for their buck?
Yeah, when I look at, I think of my children. I have an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old, and my son operates from. We bought a Dell Inspiron laptop for him recently, and so if I think biggest bang for the buck, it's gonna start with the universally applicable technology like, even a Chromebook or a laptop that gives that individual mobility. Because I go back to the quiet workplace. Maybe one day it's in an office, one day it's from a kitchen table, maybe one day it's from their bedroom. I just want that person to have the flexibility to where they can have dedicated time uninterrupted to their education, and that probably requires a mobile type product. I think that's one. The second is, and I know this is starts getting really basic, but even though I have a laptop, I use a Dell wireless keyboard and mouse because of comfort. And I think that's the other piece is how do you provide the accessories that are really low cost, but maximize the comfort and the efficiency of while you're using that technology. So I would start there. And then as you expand, most laptops have smaller screens. Dell monitors are very affordable, and it really enhances the experience to have a much larger screen to operate from versus if you're kind of hunched over and you feel like you're looking at something smaller all day. So I would focus on those as a start. And then when you go beyond that, you look at some of the enhanced video capabilities and other accessories that could, a docking station that you could plug your internet cable to, your headset in, etc. So those would kind of be nice to add. So that's kind of the sequence I'd follow if I was thinking about setup for my students.
All right, good suggestions. For both of you, Bert, you mentioned the idea that obviously employee safety is going to be paramount. You might even be basing it on who is in a more vulnerable category than maybe the younger people and making sure that they don't commingle.
Mhm.
But while you're doing that, you also may be denying the customer's accessibility to that person and degrading the customer experience. So how are you going to balance those two? And how should customers think about the customer experience, and how do you manage their expectations going forward? Great
Yeah,
question, and whoever sent it in, thank you.
yeah, I think about an evaluation. So part of when we made the transition, we task our leadership just to check in and observe. Let's make sure that if I'm a customer and I'm interacting with the employee, that something is not occurring that the employee may not recognize. Back to a quiet environment, the quality of a headset, the network connectivity, or is there a constant delay or interruption? And so we were doing a lot of evaluation of, okay, is this working? And if not, what technology do I need to provide to that employee that they don't have in their initial setup? And so I think that's a lot of just the inspection side of the leadership of the into the employee, almost replicating a customer experience so that the customer feels like, oh, this is just like an interaction I would have any other way. And then I think the second part to that is you're talking about who gets priority and who doesn't. I think that really goes back to the communication to where maybe I have someone that is more tenured and more capable, but they're like, hey, I really need to come in the office because my home environment is not conducive for me to be as successful as possible. So we just navigate that within our
Hmm.
planning. And we're very open and we have the right communication and the right expectation against all individuals that are participating. So everyone feels one, they have a plan that's specific to them, and then if they need to adjust that plan, they have a mechanism to say, this is what I need more or less of. And then we adjust accordingly. So back to that, we got to be very fluid
Yeah.
Hmm.
as well.
Guys, we only have a couple minutes left, and we're going to have to go to a wrap. I want to say something about your question about knowing when to bring people back and all the issues associated with that. You know, it raises a real hallmark of a great entrepreneur is to have that intuition, you know, that gut sense of what's right and wrong. And there's obviously no playbook here. You know, we're making decisions, pioneering every day that are new for us. And I think that, you know, Dennis talked earlier, or made the comment earlier about what makes for a great manager. And I think there's no question that an entrepreneur really has to be in touch with his or her gut and intuition and do that gut check and be strong as a leader and being artful and being nimble in that decision making. Because as I say, there's no playbook. And I think more than ever, the intuition of an entrepreneur comes into play today like never before, you know, pioneering, making those decisions. It's going to be tough, but the great entrepreneurs will rise to the top, and that'll be one of the major reasons why. So I wanted to conclude on that. I want to also announce that Startup Nation is going to give away an ultimate work from home Dell bundle. It's a $3,500 value. Go to startupnation.com, register to be entered, and you can win this great Dell Technologies ultimate work from anywhere bundle worth $3,500. Guy Gordon, thanks so much for being with us today. And Burt, can't thank you and Dell enough as well.
Of course. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
And by the way, some of our participants have asked for contact information from the three of us. You can find us on LinkedIn. Burt Powers, Jeff Sloan, Guy Gordon, we're all there, and you can reach out through LinkedIn would probably be the easiest way. Agreed?
Great.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, y'all.